G'day podcasters, welcome back to Season 6 of True Blue Conversations with your host Adam Bloom, the author of Easy Target, now available at adambloom.com.au. 8 years ago, after returning from 3 tours of Afghanistan and then gaining experience and education in financial planning, Warren Loudon teamed up with fellow veteran Dave Vaughan and started Loudon and Vaughan Private Wealth, founded with the underlying belief that every person matters and every dollar counts, providing comprehensive tailored financial advice and wealth management services for you and your family. Loudon and Vaughan will guide you towards your financial goals with integrity and transparency. Whether you're planning for retirement, investing for the future, or managing your family's wealth, they've got you covered. Visit loudonandvaughan.com.au or call 02 9538 2704 to book a meeting with Warren today.
G'day! Welcome back to True Blue Conversations. I'm Adam Bloom. Today, I have a very special guest. This man served in the 2nd Commando Regiment and did multiple tours all around the world, and he is just an absolute legend in what he has done out post his service. And we're going to talk about it's a very raw and open and honest story, and we talk about the struggles of war, the struggles of life, and his addiction to alcohol and drugs. And he's very open and honest in sharing his road back, and it is an absolute honour to have him on the podcast. So, Jon Wynn, thanks for joining us on the podcast, mate. It's an absolute honour to have you.
Thanks, Adam. Mate, it's a pleasure to come on these, and I love sharing my story and getting the opportunity to share my story because I know it does help others, and being open and honest and transparent. I know the feedback I've gotten helps others, so I'll continue to do this. But it's good to come on, mate. Thanks.
Thanks, mate. And as I said, mate, you now live abroad, so you now live in beautiful Spain. And, mate, we're making this work and fitting into a busy schedule, mate. But I thank you for coming on. But, mate, before we get into your military career, let's go back to a young Jon. And can you talk to us about you growing up, mate, and what life was like?
Life. So I was born in Newcastle. I spent a few years there. I don't really remember that. And then we moved. My old man was a fisherman, and then I became a fisheries inspector. So that meant we'd have to move every 2 years. So the first posting he got was Deniliquin. So we went down to and I remember this. I remember going down, being down there. But having an older brother, 2 younger sisters, life was pretty manicky, I guess. Like that age, we're all sort of 1 year apart. So it was, there was some bad times, some good times, but I remember always being very active. Yeah. But basically every 2 years, for the next sort of 6 years, this would just pepper pot around. But basically, what really little, that's my sort of fond memories. But always into sport. I found that as like my coping mechanism, which went on to what I do today, and I still use that as my armor and my resilience shield. Yeah.
So, mate, Deniliquin, people, I've been to Deniliquin, mate, and I know what it's like. So, what was that like for you the first couple of years there? Because it's a small country town, and what were you getting up to mischief down there?
Well, that would have been like when I started school. So I remember it hot. It was on the Murrumbidgee, I think it was, or Murrumbidgee River. I remember fishing, going with Dad a few times, my brother as well. But I remember just being hot, and that was sort of my introduction to sports as well. But I really just remember just being hot and not much to do. And back in the days where we were all catching the bus to go to school in kindergarten. So this is it's a different time, a totally different era back then, being able to do that. Even walking home from school, I remember you'd see like the yellow stickers on mailboxes. So it was a safety house. So if you got in trouble, you could go in there. I don't even think this exists anymore. So it was a totally different time.
Mate, I actually remember that myself. So I'm only a few years younger than you, and I remember those the yellow. Yep, I remember those stickers, and you always knew that you could go in there if you felt unsafe, and the old phone
Yeah.
boxes, and mate, kids today they wouldn't even know what that was.
Yeah, it's just a different era, and I've been talking with my wife now. We've got two young kids. Like once they get older, I'm like, I'd like to think they can still walk to school, but I don't know if it's a reality. Like where we live in Spain is pretty good, but if you watch the media and you watch all this stuff, like there's no way you do it. But I think it's location dependent, right? And yeah, but it's just totally different. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so, mate, we talked about that you joined the military, but before you joined the military, did you have any other family members that had served before you, or were you the first?
Uh, so my grandfather, he was in the national service. So he did his a couple of years, and I actually he told me when I was before I joined the military actually, and I knew he'd done time, but I didn't actually really understand what it was. And it was essentially the chocos now, yeah, reservist. So he was from out Galaganbone, so Canamble, right out country in New South Wales. So he was from out there, but he did his service time. He went to Singo, so he told me about that. But he's I had an uncle who was a reservist engineer, but that wasn't on my blood side. That was my auntie. But no, that was it. No one in World War Two. No one in World War One. Yeah.
So, for you, what drew your interest to join the military? Was it, I mean, 9/11 happened. What do you remember of 9/11, mate? And was it that moment that you think that made you spark your interest in joining a few years later?
Yeah, I still remember this. I was 12 or 13, I think. And we're about to head to Sydney for it was a state athletics meet. And I was quite into athletics back then. And I remember it was the morning we were about to leave. I'm pretty sure. And it came all over the news. And uh, I remember back then as even a young boy thinking like I think I'm going to be involved in this somehow. And I was obviously too young, but the way it was being talked up back then was going to be a long time, and that's part of the programming, I guess. Now I'm a little bit older, a little bit wiser to how things works, but essentially, a younger generation were getting indoctrinated in a way to like for service, and with the idea of the enemy and all this. And I remember the war on terror. Like I remember this growing up, thinking, being the way I was brought up in, especially in Australian culture, is to be a man and like you're gonna have to maybe go fight and do these things. But I remember thinking I'm probably going to be a part of this somehow. Yeah.
And so a few years go forward, and in 2007, you decided to join the army. And do you think that what happened in 2001? There was just that, as you said, it was just that draw of I've got to be part of this. Like there's something calling me to be part of this.
It wasn't when I got through like 14, 15, 16, when I was in high school. I remember even in year 10, I think it was, where they recruiters and like occupations will come to school and they try to sell themselves and they try to get you in. I remember then not being real interested, but the seed had been planted. Yeah. So I remember getting to like 18. So I left school in year 11 to do an apprenticeship as a roof tiler. Probably the worst mistake you could don't leave school to become a roof tiler. I couldn't get closer to the sun, and it was just shit work. But I wanted to look for an out from school. And at that point, I'd sort of got an injury in athletics, but I was playing football. So I decided to try to make it in rugby league, and um, it wasn't until I sort of visited this. My brother would try to get in the military, so he went through two different application processes, and he failed both times on the sort of psychological side. And it after the second time, I was about 19 or so, and I hadn't got picked up to play rugby league. Like I'd been playing first grade, but some mates got picked up, to play representative, and then they went down to some feeder clubs, and I thought maybe I was in there for chance, and it just didn't happen. And my brother had a magazine in his room, and it was ADF magazine thereabouts, but I found the program in it for DRS. So that was when I was about 19, and when I found that, it all just sort of lined up together. And when I was reading about it, and it's sort of, you need a high aptitude, but you need to be really fit. The program started with getting athletes who had the high aptitude and could essentially transition. And I was like, okay, well, I'm sort of an athlete, and but I never finished school. So I'm like, well, I don't think I have the aptitude. And then obviously applied and just went through that process. But the seed was always planted from when I was about 13, and then I pulled the trigger when the situation sort of lined up where I didn't get anywhere in footy, and work-wise, I didn't have anything really going. And to get out of a small town where I grew up in Laurelton, for the majority of my childhood, it was a good scenario to get out.
So you mentioned that you went through the DRS system, so the direct recruiting scheme into the Special Forces. For you, are you glad looking back now that you did go down the DRS system instead of going through the regular army?
That's a good question. I've always sort of tried to be elite in anything I do. So like playing sport or undertaking some activity. But I remember getting to the unit, and people would guys who had gone the normal route, so give you regular time, and that they put a bit of shit on us. It's totally changed now. I think most of the guys in the unit are probably DRS guys, and they proved that it actually the system works. But no, look, I'm glad I went through the route I did, because going to the regular army, even though I got mixed with some of those guys, I always sort of aspired to be that elite. And some could say it's like cheating a little bit, like you don't have to go do your time and learn the basics really well, but the program was there to find people like me who could acquire the skills fast, and then had the knowledge and the athletic background, I guess, to do what they were asking. And like I did selection when I went through, in my DRS, there was probably 45 started, and by the time we did selection, there was maybe 15 of us or 17 of us, and a good chunk of the guys went through. So it worked, and that was enough to show me that, like, we're just as capable as everyone else.
And I think too, mate, what it shows is like you act like the desire. You want to be there. You very quickly. You've gone through the direct system. You want to test yourself and challenge yourself. And I think, yeah, as some people go, and some I've spoken to go, oh, I was in the regular army. I thought I'd try my hand at, and just see how I go and throw my hat in the ring. But you were like, no, this is what I want to do. And for you, great, as you say, it really did show in what you went through, and most of the guys went through with you to selection. So for you, what do you remember of your time at Kapuka?
Kapuka is hot. Doing drill, eating flies. Yeah, it was Kapuka. I went in there since day one, I had the right mindset. Like, I was prepared. And I got a lot of compliments, I guess, from even my mates who I went through with, that I would always be very stoic about things. So I always had the mindset, like, they're going to throw shit at us, like, just do it. Like, someone's got to do the shit work, so it's just going to be us, and it's not going to last forever. I always had that in my head, that this is only temporary. So it was pretty shit, but intense. It was hot, and doing those lessons, breaking up the 40 minutes in such hot weather and falling asleep. That was probably the most difficult thing, is trying to keep awake in those lectures. But it was I didn't have a terrible time at Kapuka. You got to eat well. Got really skinny because so much drill. But I didn't find the experience all too bad. But every time we went into, because of the DRS, the actual going through the courses is quite intense. It's just one to the next, not much time off. So we're always looking forward to just get through to the next stage because we knew selection was coming up, and yeah, so we just had to just suck it up and just acquire as many skills as we can. But it wasn't too bad for me.
So how long were you there for, mate? Was it 45 days?
3 months.
Yeah, nice, nice.
Yeah, it was changed. It was I think it not long changed. I believe something like this. Yeah. So I went through there. My platoon was old DRS, and then we had a sister platoon that was mixed.
So oh,
It's
sorry,
good.
mate. Yeah, no,
No,
and
no.
so you finish your time at Kapooka, you march out, and then you go to initial employment training at Singleton. What was that like, mate? Is that where you really started to feel that, yeah, this is where the home of the soldier is? Like, you actually learning all your tactics, and what was that like for you?
Yeah, that was another level up. But you got a little bit more freedom, a little bit more responsibility, I guess. So you could go out after a certain time. You could go to your weekend, and you're treated a little bit more like a grown up. But you got beasted. Yeah, like I know hearing stories at Kapooka, it changed where a lot of the punishment physical and it sort of there's probably some legal cases and stuff where things had to change. When we got to IETs, we're like, this is probably what Kapooka was like. So a lot tougher. The secos beast in ya, physical punishment. I don't think they could do that at Kapooka, not physical, but it was tough. But again, we always had our eyes set on what's the next thing coming. We just got to get through this, acquire as many skills as we can. But like I always knew that this is the base skills, what we need to all the tactics and stuff like that. Even though the weapons, like the style, we wouldn't use when we moved on, but it was all just suck it up for this 3 months, just get through to the next phase. But the field phase was pretty tough. I remember digging in and my first sort of introduction to sleep deprivation, and having to still perform and think and that. But again, it was tough, but I was always, what's next? That was my mindset.
So you started to mentally prepare for selection, and for you, like, you're a fit guy, but did you feel that you were prepared when you got to the unit because at that stage it was still 4RAR Commando at that stage and hadn't switched over to Second Commando Regiment? And did you feel that you mentally and physically fit and ready to go for selection?
So after ITs, we had to go on to AITs. So we went into advanced infantry. So we had once we finished ITs, then we went to a different. So we stayed in Singo, but we went to the Special Forces Training Command. It's moved now, I believe. It's moved a few times, I believe. But we moved to these bees huts, and then like when we were ITs, the Rio before us were staying in there. So we'd see the guys, and they'd be wearing different boots and not having name tags on, and so you didn't know who they were. And we're like, this is like it always the carrot was dangled, and we always wanted to be like the elite guys. So we always were looking at that. But we knew we had to go into the AIT, so we had to do that, and that was really where I'd say the best preparation we had, because how it worked was it was the sub two, so guys are doing their team commander course for who are commandos and SAS. So they would come and use us as the diggers and command us. And so we're at field for at least 2 to 3 weeks. And they just showed us and told us what it's really like. They just got back from war, and so that was, you couldn't get any closer to what it was going to be like and what you have to be prepared for. That was the biggest probably learning experience, is hanging out with those guys. And then as we moved on, we got to operate with them now.
So that would have been, like, for you, invaluable to sort of help you with your selection, and so you get there and talk me through selection, mate, and how many started and how many finished, and for you, what was the toughest part? Because I know most people say demarcation, but for you, what was the toughest part?
So when we started, my last name's Wynn, obviously. So It's alphabetical and numerical. So if you've got a W in your last name, you're probably at the end somewhere. I think I was 80 something. I can't actually remember the number. There was nearly 100. And by the time we finished, I've got to say there's probably around 35, around so a decent number. But it was quite an experience. I remember the first 3 days were a bit of a shock. That's where you do all your testing, and it's like we thought IETs was tough, and then this was another level. And this is back when you had, I don't know what it's like now, but back then we had scary DSs. Like, well, I probably won't say some of the names, but the guy, if you went through in those sort of 2 years before and after, you'd know who I'm talking about. So it was quite intimidating. Luckily, when you do AITs, they taught us the M4. They taught us SF weaponry. So we went in there knowing how to use a lot of the equipment and then the weapons. So we went in there for a little bit of advantage. A lot of people sort of struggled on the navigation as well. We knew Singleton like the back of our hand because we'd done so many NavXs out there and preparing for it. So we, in a way, we probably were prepared more than some of the regular soldiers. So it was tough. I remember at the end of the I think patrol sort of phase, that was quite tough. I remember being really weak, and I remember having my Oki strap from my my hoochie holding my pants up because I'd lost so much weight and so gaunt, and we're getting a little bit of sleep, but you're living off rat packs for that 7 to 10 days. That was pretty tough. But again, because it's broken up into phases, we knew, okay, this is this phase and then this phase. It's always, okay, what's next? What's next? The demarcation, yeah, that was pretty brutal. That was right at the end. But again, like you're looking at your watch and you're looking at the days. I think it was the longest selection course in one of the training and selection courses in the world, I believe. Back it was like 30 or 35 days. So we're looking at a watch going, it's got to be coming up. It's got we've got to be finishing soon. So it's always knowing that it's going to come to an end. But the toughest part for me, yeah, I guess all of it was pretty tough. The end of that field phase or the patrol phase, more or less, and then the demarcation was tough. Yeah, that's sort of what comes to my mind. Yeah.
So you finished selection, mate, and what was that like getting to the end of selection? Going like proud moment for you. Going, I've done like I've done this.
Yeah, very proud. Bringing the family and my girlfriend at the time, and they knew if they didn't hear from me, it was going to be good news up until that 35 days or whatever it was, and there was a sense of a big sense of pride, but knowing, okay, now we're going to go do our courses, and this is where it gets tougher. Yeah.
So you finish selection, mate, proud moment, and then you go onto the Rio cycle. And for you, did you have anything that you, like, as you said, you're a pretty sporty guy and like you had the psychological, like, did you struggle with anything?
Not really. No, I knew nothing was going to happen where I was going to die, or there was nothing that I wasn't going to be able to do. I understood that in a selection process, they push you to see what you're capable of, and they don't really care if you can't do it. They just want to make sure you don't quit, or you're a liability, or if they know that you can keep going and you don't, that's the issue. So I knew as long as I just did everything that I was asked, I was going to be okay. And there's enough medical staff and all that around where it was going to be safe. But yeah, I just believed in myself that I could do it. Yeah, like I had enough training and I was still young enough back then where I could handle a lot of shit. So yeah.
Because how old were you, mate, when you did pass Rio?
So I enlisted just before my 21st birthday in Kapuka. I spent my 22nd birthday on selection. and then I was at war before I was 23. So
Wow. Yeah, right, mate.
yeah, we didn't stop. We went all the way through, and then my first, it was my first 2, 3 years in the military were insane.
Absolutely, and most 23-year-olds, mate. I even think back to what I was doing, and yeah, I wasn't going to war, mate. I was partying hard, and which we'll get into later on in
Yeah.
the podcast with you, mate. What was the feeling like after you'd finally passed Rio and you got presented your green beret? What was that like?
Yeah, that was awesome. Like all that sort of coming to an end. It was 6 or 7 months of reinforcement cycle, which is pretty tough to get through all that stuff. Because we lost a lot of guys on that process. So I don't know if a lot of people know that it's quite tough. They like the CQB, all this stuff. Like it's really high risk. You need to be really safety conscious. And even now, when we did our parachuting, like we did it at the start, and we lost a lot of guys, and they changed it, I think, because you're losing so many guys on the Rio cycle, and now I've got to repair broken legs. So it's pretty fortunate to get through it all, and not have to come back and do it later. But it was amazing. Yeah, I remember we got our berets up at Singo, and then essentially we got our posting straight to 4 hour, and we knew we were going to Charlie Company to deploy. We knew we had about 2 or 3 months before we were going to war.
So I want to talk about the mindset of, you're getting ready to go and deploy into a war zone. Afghanistan's heading up. But I want to touch, as I touched on at the start of the podcast, mate, we're going to talk about your alcohol and drugs. And for you, did that start before the military, or was it really at the start of your military career that's where it started you started to have alcohol and drugs?
So I've always been exposed to alcohol. My growing up, my grandparents owned a liquor store, and then my parents took over the liquor store of them when I moved up to Camden Haven, so up near Port Macquarie. So I've always been around alcohol. My dad was a pretty heavy drinker. Didn't really talk about that too much, but being sort of exposed to that at a young age, it sort of gave me some certain coping mechanisms, and essentially I was getting programmed in a way to sort of head towards and potentially become someone like that. But I was always around alcohol. Drinking as a child, this happened in their family. I remember at Christmas at my grandparents, with all the grandchildren. So there'd be 12 of us, and we would have our little glass of Asti Riccadonna at Christmas breakfast, at lunch. So we always had it, but it wasn't a huge issue. I was drinking of a weekend, maybe 12, 13, I think it was. But I never drank more than 2 days in a row, even getting into like 15, 16, when you go into parties and people are coming over. It was always just a one night thing. Even playing rugby league, playing first grade when I was 17, 18, would drink heavy after a game, and then you'd do nothing the next day. And I thought those people who were crazy would drink the next day. And then I ended up becoming one of those people, but way worse. But drinking heavily has always been there, binge drinking. It never became a problem until the military. And I'd been exposed to drugs, but I never ever took drugs until the military. And I was a product of the environment, essentially.
Well, we're going to talk about, and we're going to get into your first trip and what happened, and I want to touch on that with the listeners. And once you hear what Jon has been through, you'll understand. And this is why I got you on, Jon, because it's such a unique story in the sense of your road to recovery is one of just pure. It's amazing, mate, and where you are now, mate. And this is what I wanted to get into. So you deploy to Afghanistan. It's heating up. So was that 2008 your first trip to Afghanistan?
Now it's 2009. So I went with Charlie Company. They said they just come off team, and they were
Yep.
going back into the way the formations in the unit got set up, where there's only one company doing black roll, and then so they were coming back into green roll. We went over with them, and that was the first. We took over in June or July 2009. So that was rotation 10. So this is where I think the early rotations sort of not so kinetic in that, I think. And then around 2008 started picking up again, if I remember rightly. And this is where soldiers were getting killed, and this is becoming pretty serious. Yeah. But it was the start of the summer.
So talk me through that, mate. Talk me through the first time outside the wire and your mindset in you've just done selection, you've done Rio, you're now in Afghanistan, and talk to me mindset of going outside the wire and the first time you were in your first tick.
Yeah, so the way I looked at it, how I describe it is, so you sign up and for a footy team and you're training. You're always training and training, and then you get to play. And this is where we get to play. This is where it's like you get to go on the field, and this is where you get to see who you are and what type of man you are, I guess. And when bullets come back at you, and a lot of training goes into this, and a lot of inoculation, like getting used to what it's going to be like. It's not quite. You can go through so much training, but it's never going to be like when bullets actually start coming back and they're hitting the dirt around you. But you get to find out who you are. Yeah. And I think for me, if I look at myself honestly, like I handled it pretty well. Some guys handle it like incredible, some guys don't. So for me, like I handled it okay. In that first rotation, Rot 10, we got into a lot of gunfights. Yeah. So I think it would have been probably my second patrol, third patrol. Like we were in ticks. Yeah. So that was I grew up fast in that environment. Yeah. I was 22 at the time on Special Forces operations around guys who'd been doing counterterrorism for a long time, like and had done trips to Afghanistan. I was a little boy trying to become a man. Yeah.
Mate, I want to talk about that first trip as well because you got shot as well, didn't you? Like, can you talk me through that?
Yeah, that was probably my second or third gunfight. Yeah. Yeah, so we're doing vehicle operations at this time. We just started the transition into BMWs actually. So our platoon was doing vehicle ops, and then we had the other platoon doing helos. So, and then we would sort of rotate between. But I remember it quite vividly. Like it still stuck with me. Like this is where I understood the depths of like PTSD and what trauma. Even I've got a lot of trauma from my youth, but I didn't realize I held on to it like I held on to this. And I remember, so I got shot in the back plate. And it was the middle of summer. And my scout was actually next to me, a good mate of mine. And when this actually happened, like we were patrolling forward, and when it hit me in the back, all my water bottles. So I had one camelback and a lot of water bottles, but the water bottle came over and landed in front of me, and that crack was so loud. And then I just feel all this warm liquid. I'm like, fuck, like it's actually penetrated me. So in that moment, like I start returning fire. The scout comes over and takes my kit off because it looks like I've been shot. And then we realized it was just in my plate. And that moment that like I've actually survived this, like sort of that invincibility. This is where it started. We're like, fuck, I got out the other side of this, like I'm still fighting. And we could sort of have a laugh about it. That there was one of so many close calls happened with so many guys. But this was the start of like the invincibility. And I remember when we harbored up that night and before we were going on the job the next day, laying in bed in my swag and thinking like, what has this done to my nervous system? And then waking up that night like hearing that crack, like waking up and thought it happened again. I'm like, fuck, this has scarred my brain somehow. Yeah. But never really spoke about that. Never, like, it was just brushed off. So many guys, so many close calls, guys getting shot through their cams, hidden weapons. Like, I wasn't the only one that this happened to, but you just cracked on and kept going. And I think it's changed now with when you have these incidents happens, because we were seeing what guys are holding on to this trauma. And back then there was no, you didn't voice this stuff, but yeah, it was quite an experience. That was my first real traumatic sort of incident. Yeah, for myself, but I obviously witnessed a lot as well.
Absolutely, mate. And as you say, just compartmentalize it and just push it back and just keep cracking on. You're on mission, as you said. You're in the special forces. And did you did you tell your mum about this incident, or like when you were over there, or did it wasn't till many years later that you said, I was actually shot?
So I won't go into details about the incident, and in the future there will be a time and a place for this, but it was compartmentalized for reasons. And I did the right thing back then. An older John, a bit more senior, a bit wiser, it probably would have been spoken about. But back then, like, I had a job to do. Most of the guys around me were doing awesome work, and we just yeah, had a job to do. But I do remember speaking to mum and saying, she's like, "What's it like?" I'm like, "I'm probably going to become religious." I remember saying this to her, like, this is pretty gnarly. And yeah, but I like, once I got back from rotation and that, like, I did talk about it with close people, but it's sort of the events around it, not so much. These come out sort of later on in life.
Hmm. And for you, mate, your first trip, it was a real kinetic trip. Did you guys have any, like, have any wounded in action or and KIAs on that first trip?
No, no, we got through pretty scot-free, I believe. Yeah, like pretty not that I remember. No, no. I remember
So,
towards the end of the rotation, there's the Alpha Company incident, and a lot of guys were friends with Meso, and that was all that a lot of guys wanted to go back for that. But that was the only real negative thing that happened on our trip, was here that incident happening.
so you come back, mate, and how are you at this point? Like, you come back, you've been in country, and how long was that first deployment?
That was June, I think it was, or June or July, till November. So it's like 4 months. That was pretty normal. So we do 4 months, and then there'd be another commando group do 4 months. So we'd do the fighting seasons, and then Chocos would come in and do the winter, the cold period.
And
Yeah.
so you come back, mate, and is that when you really start to turn it on with the drinking and the risk taking phase of your career and your life?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah. I went up another notch coming back from that. Started taking drugs because I gave myself permission. Like, we worked hard, like, a lot of close calls. There's a good chance that like, 5 centimeters here or there, like, you're probably less, you could have been killed. So we were enjoying life. Like, I was young. You get a lot of money on those trips. I'm surrounded by people who, similar to me, work hard, party hard. So I gave myself permission, but it really ramped up. And essentially knowing that I had to go back to work, we got back in November. I think we had to be back by end of January, something like this. Um, yeah, it was a I think I every time I went to war, I'd put on like 10 kilos, because wasn't drinking. I'd get fit, I'd get healthy, and then I'd come back from war and I'd lose it in 4 weeks, all of it. Just
Ah, yeah.
yeah, it was pretty crazy. But yeah, that first holiday after being at war was a big decompression. Yeah.
So was that just you went just partying with your mates, drinking, drugs, just going
Yep.
nuts, mate?
Yeah, we went to, I think we went to South America, to be honest. I went with some mates and we're like, we've got to live life. Like it's, life's could be too short. But all this is knowing that we've got to go back to war. Like
Mm,
this is part of the reason.
absolutely.
We knew that how the war was going, and there's only so many commandos or so many SAS who were going on these operations, and I knew that I'd be going back in probably a year. And that was the mindset I had, that I can go do whatever I want. Like I've survived, and I'm going back to war, which I might come back from. I gave myself a lot of permission.
So you mentioned you're going back, and so your second trip, mate. Talk me lead up training, and where was the war at this point, and how long before you actually deployed on your second trip?
So there was no lit up training. So what happened after the Alpha Company incident, where unfortunately Mason was killed, Alpha Company had to be backloaded, I guess. So they needed soldiers to step up. I remember some of the Charlie guys went to Delta, who were going to be going back the next fighting season. I think Charlie were going to be after that. So they jumped ship to go back to war. What happened was they approached some of us young guys who'd just done their first trip, and they said, "Do you want to go back with Alpha Company?" And a mate of mine, he took that spot. I said, "No, like I want to stay with Charlie." So he took that spot, and then what ended up happening was some other guys couldn't go through injury and I think some disciplinary action, I believe. So they come back to me and they went, "There's spots there. Do you want to go?" And I went, "Fucking," I said, "Yeah, I'll go." So I was back. I think I went in April or March, end of March. So I come back from South America. I think I'm staying Charlie, and then they approached me and said, "Do you want to go back?" And I went, "Yep." And so my first year at the unit, I worked this out. I remember because when I had to do my letter for why I should stay after failing a drug test, I remember saying my first year at the unit, I spent 290 days at war. Like I think I did my fair share. And then I did, obviously another trip on that and some PSDs. But yeah, so that was my first year. Went back over with Alpha Company and did the same thing.
So your second trip, mate, 2010. That's right. Yep, that was and unfortunately during this rotation you lost the three: Timmy Applin, Ben Chuck, and Scotty Palmer, mate. That was it was a pretty shit rotation, and talk me through your second trip over there.
Yeah, so for me personally, I went into Alpha not knowing anyone. Like I was still, I'd only known my company. I knew that I was good on the tools, and I knew I was going to be able to handle this, but I was really outside my comfort zone. But I really started to like war. I liked the idea of it. You're away from life. But there's no parking fines. There's no fights with your missus, or there's no stresses. Like you're at war, and that's all you. This is your focus, and you get to get fit. But obviously, it's a huge gamble just with how things were going. But so going back over fitting in with Alpha Company guys, I went into it because they did some background on me. They said they couldn't find any info about me, so I was in an echo role. So that means like I was where you got PHQ. I was the essentially scout or operator, the fighter for those guys. But with everything that was happening, I ended up going into a team not too long into the trip. We essentially had a four-man team just because of how the casualties and whatnot that we'd lost. So it was definitely a different trip to my first one. Yeah, there's a lot of high energy in the first one, a lot of big morale, and there wasn't Alpha 2, but it was different. It was very different with especially that chopper crash, and yeah, it was totally different.
And for the listener, mate, your, as you said, your strength of the like you were 4-man teams, but at full strength, they're what usually six men to a team. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, six man team. Yeah, so some of the teams had six, but what I went into, we had to essentially form a team to keep. So a company, we had enough teams in the company, and that was pretty much at the end of the trip. That's how it was. But we're still conducting operations. It was definitely. I remember the trip. Um, we actually had a battle with assets as well. So they only had so many helos for us. So we were doing a lot of vehicle stuff. But my first one was a lot of helos. My second one was a lot of vehicle because FE Alpha, so the SAS were getting the helos predominantly. Um, yeah. So yeah.
So, mate, you were involved in Operation Shawali Cot. Without going into too much detail, what do you remember of this operation? Because it was pretty big.
Yep. Yeah, it was hot. It was middle of summer. This is where I learnt about water discipline. We landed and we knew we were going to be, so we were in packs. So we landed. Yeah, we were doing our operation in our valley, and we kicked off pretty early in the morning into ticks, like essentially infill, I believe. And we essentially yeah, could. I remember not being able to get water refilled, water resubbed because of the helos would take, which is too risky. So I remember being up, swapping out with a team with snipers, and we had no water. I remember like it was tough, and like knowing like we don't know when the water resup's coming in. Like it was yeah, it was an experience. Yeah, and
Oh,
obviously that the big gunfight, I guess. That was predominantly with the Alpha. But yeah, we were essentially they got to come in and go out pretty fast. We had to stay there for days.
so, mate, could you draw back on the days of selection, like with where, like, you're in the hurt locker, no water, like everyone, like that, everyone's been there, of quench of thirst, like you just want that water, and could you draw back on your time in when you're on selection?
Yeah. Like that's the whole point of it is to see what can you handle it. If you can't handle it in training on operation, this is like there's no DS coming to fucking save you. Like you suck it up and you don't be a liability to your team. Um, yeah, like those moments of like, am I going to be able to do this? I never thought like, oh, I can't do this. Like this sucks. Like, but everyone else has to go through it as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
if you were found wanting in those times, yeah, you're pushed out of the teams pretty soon. Yeah, you just have to suck it up. Yeah, but it was
So,
that mentality has helped me for what I do now. Yeah, like I do fitness racing now, which I'm sure you obviously know, and it gets hot, and 60-minute race, and I talk about this often. Like I don't need water for a 60-minute race. Like I've gone in operations in the middle of summer in Afghanistan in 50 degrees without fucking water.
yeah. Well,
Yeah,
mate, we'll talk about that in a little
yeah,
bit down the track in the potty, but
yeah.
and because people don't realize too, mate, that you like are fighting at what altitude of over in Afghanistan? It's what, like 3,000 feet? Is that similar to that?
I think we're up to like 2,000 meters.
Yeah,
Uh,
right.
yeah. I remember going over and getting up the Herc and like this is interesting. And it being so hot as well. And it never really clicked toward altitude. I've never been at altitude before. When you got back from rotation, then I realized that when I got back to sea level and doing a BFA test back when you get back from war, you feel like you're on. It was like what EPO is now, but yeah, like it was tough. Those first 2-3 weeks, if you go to operations straight away at altitude with all your kit on, is tough. It's tough. Yeah.
Absolutely. And mate, I want to talk about, so you had, it was a kinetic trip, the loss of the guys. How are you traveling mentally at this point?
Um, I probably more of this invincibility had set in, because I could have quite often. So when this helicopter crash happened, we'll day in, day off. So we'll do an operation one day, the other platoon. We'll do the next one, pepper potting and the alternating days. So quite often could have been us. And we obviously had to go out with the QRF and had to see what had happened. And that could have been us. It's just the nature of war. But after that happened, I knew it's such a big loss. Like that the ramp ceremony and that carrying 3 caskets was pretty shitty, yeah. And these weren't my close mates, so I could only understand what Alpha Company were going through. But essentially, I knew I was going back to Charlie, and I was coming back the next rotation. So I was already just not living in the present there, focused on this. I was like, okay, I'm going back to Charlie. Like that's what I need to focus on. Get through this rotation, and I'll go back to my crew. Yeah.
And I think too, mate, it's a really good point you touch on there is like you hadn't experienced a ramp service before because in your previous deployment, you guys were very lucky that you had you had nothing happen. And as you say, you didn't know these guys, but still it's the Australian flag on a coffin of guys from the regiment that had paid the ultimate sacrifice, mate. That'll affect anybody, regardless if you know them or not.
Yeah, it was tough. And like I said, like I wasn't from Alpha, but we had that many guys involved in the rep, so many. Like I was carrying Scotty, and like I wasn't even from that company. Like this is how many guys were involved in the proceedings after. It was pretty insane. Pretty yeah, raw, emotional time to be back in. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so you come back, mate, from your second trip, and do you get a chance to decompress? And obviously, you said you're going back to Charlie, getting ready to deploy again, and so the units just this is how it was, just rotating like we're going in and out of country. Just if you weren't doing green roll, you're doing black roll. If you weren't doing black roll, you're back in your war fighting. Did you actually get a chance to decompress before you're back in Afghanistan again for your third trip?
Yep. So I got back in. It would have been. It was winter in Oz, I remember. So July, August, somewhere around here. June, July. Maybe a little bit later. So I had a little bit of time off, probably around 2-3 weeks, and then went back into the unit, and then went back to Charlie Company to speak to my CSM. I'm like, we had an arrangement. I said I would do this Alpha trip if I'm allowed to come back, and they said, "Yep, no worries." Well, it actually, the CSM said he didn't know what I was talking about, but then some of the platoon, the 1-1, got involved, and was one of the sergeants there and said, "No, you just did make this promise." So then I got moved back into Charlie, and then we would deploy in 2011. So I had probably 5-6 months to prepare, and this was a full MRE. So get ready, get used to your team. Yeah, so that was a full prep. It's a lot better to do a prep like that where you get to know you guys, or your TTPs, how you do things, and build the bond with the guys you're going to be sharing the rotation.
Absolutely. And mate, you deploy, as you said, in 2011 for your third trip. And mate, talk me through the highs and lows of this trip because there was some real lows on this trip as well.
Yep. So this was a really we started doing operations with DA. There was I think Bravo or before us. Yeah, one of the companies before us started this relationship where we're doing counter narcotics. So we got rocked in. So we had unlimited sort of helo assets. We had DA, so we're doing counter narcotics. And now in Afghanistan, where the narcotics are usually where the money is, and where the money is where the enemy are, and the top end sort of leaders. So we're doing a lot of fly in, just tear shit up, fly out, and then just see what happens, stir the pot, and then I won't go into too much, but tell them to just get involved and see what happens. So we started to do a lot of that, and obviously that high tempo was quite stressful and quite a lot of adrenaline. Yeah, so a lot of going in, just tearing shit up, flying out, and ultimately that trip we lost 3 soldiers again, and this obviously was a lot closer to me, so I could understand what the Alpha Company guys went through. Yeah, losing Todd, Brett, and Rowan on this trip. Yeah.
And in such a short space of time, mate, too. Like, within a 6 week period, you lost, Brett, Todd, and then Rowan as well. Like that affects, mate, anybody.
Yeah, like to get going back out on operations. I know just looking back, some guys was like, you can't keep going out. Like we're going to lose more guys. But moving into Helmand, so this was, and even after our rotation, they went in, and this is where I think, some companies went through, Americans went through, and they said we need to clean this up because this was a lot of the Badlands, all the tunnel systems and all that. This is where they can hide out. So. I think they end up going back a couple of years later, or maybe a year later, and just going through with tanks and clearing all this out because it was such a dangerous area. Yeah.
And as you say, mate, like for you, Helman, like you're going in, it was the Badlands, and for you, your third trip, probably your most kinetic trip, looking back now of all your trips.
Yeah, yeah. Like looking back, I was fortunate enough on most of my trips. I was a big guy, I guess, back then. Like I was 90 kilos, and when I finished the trip anyway, not when I start.
Yeah.
But carrying the machine gun, so the 48. Like I sort of you can look back and judge it off how many ticks you're in, how many rounds you fired. I fired a lot in that trip, a lot. Yeah.
So you mentioned, you lost the 3 guys that you knew in this rotation. Was how like mentally now are these things starting to build up and build up and build up for you?
Yeah, like I was, I guess, held on to a lot of this, and a lot of guys did. We never talked about anything, like, and the reason is it's like I think it's pretty common knowledge now is if you talked about stuff, you wouldn't go back. Yeah, so you shown that you were having issues, you can't go back to war. So we never spoke about it, and you just held on to it. I'm sure the psychs were just seeing this pressure cooker, what it was doing to people. And later on, I can go into detail. The psychiatrist I work with explained it
Mm.
to me, and it's made complete sense. But it was you just held on to it. It come out in other areas of your life, frustration, anger. You just essentially drank to, and this was my escape to deal with it. Um, but yeah, everything was just suppressed, and you just held on to it. You spoke about it. There were guys who would speak about stuff, and you knew that they got removed from the teams. So you're like, and unfortunately, there was a stigma with a bit of a weak guy if you're doing this. So I think it's changed now. I think I understand that too many guys have shown mental health illness and suicide. It's huge that people need to speak about this, but also in the same boat, you're an SF operator on operations. You're going to be exposed to shit. So I think now the lookout is where's the middle ground, I guess. Yeah.
And had your family noticed a change in you, mate, from your first trip to your third trip? Had they started to notice things were a bit like you weren't right at that point?
Just reckless, stupid. I'm sure they knew drug taking and the drinking. Like, it wasn't hard to see. Um, yeah, but they never intervened. They knew, like I was still young, man. I was still at that stage, my third trip, I'm 24, 25. Like
Yeah.
I'm still young, but
Yeah.
I'm developing into a man. And at that stage, I'm still hanging around good people. Like I always was in the unit, but I wasn't listening to them. That was my downfall. One of my downfalls. But they knew this because I told them some of the stuff that was going on, and I was over there for these incidents. We had soldiers killed, and they knew that I had to be doing something on me. But I always, I I knew when I was getting back from that Charlie trip, I was going to counterterrorism. So it was always something else.
Yeah.
Always something else.
So mate, you get back and then you rotate onto tag and mate, talk me through this and it was only for a short time.
Yeah, so we went on to CT, and then what ended up happening was if you were on black roll at the time or CT, you were responsible for the PSDs, so the close personal protection of any ministers that sort of went in, or the prime minister. And I got the opportunity to do two prime ministers, Julia and Kevin Rudd at the time. And then I got sent back to Kabul to do this permanent PSD for another 4 months. So my first few months or first 5 months, 4 or 5 months in TAG were actually back in Afghanistan.
Far
Yeah.
out.
So I
Mate,
was looking after the highest ranking general we had in Afghanistan at the time. I was in a small team doing that.
far out. Like for you, mate, I'm just seeing this and like I'm reading through the bio that you sent through to me and just, mate, just, 4 trips, just back to back to back to back. Like, no wonder, as you said, you're 25, like you're in the moment. You're living in the moment. And for you now, mate, looking back, did you stop and say, well, this is exactly what I signed up for. This is what I thought like being a special forces operator was all about.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I thought this is it. Like there's only there's operations to go on, and I'm capable to do it. I'm getting a little bit older and a bit senior now. I actually went on to promotion courses just after this, but I knew that it was going to get even more serious for me, as in like a commando, because I was getting some time up, and with time, and if you've proven yourself, you'll get responsibility. So yeah, it was. Yeah, quite an experience.
Absolutely. And mate, I want to highlight something for the listener here too, that I know you're very humble and you won't, I'll bring it up, but you were nominated for an award and while you're overseas. And mate, can you talk us through how you were nominated and what this award means to you now?
Yeah, so I got received a commendation for gallantry from my third rotation. Yeah, I don't speak about it heaps. A lot of guys did some tremendous work and some bravery, a lot braver things than I did. In different scenarios. But on my third rotation, we're over near Pakistan on the border there. So in Afghanistan, but it's Kabul, I think it was, and um, well, it was at the start of our rotation and got into a tick. We had some guys separated on we're doing a river crossing actually, and being with the machine gun, I was one of the first to push over to secure it, and we started receiving accurate fire, and just stayed and kept returning fire to because we had someone that gets swept down the river who was open to fire in the fire lane. So just me just doing my job essentially got an award, but receiving accurate fire. This is one of these moments, I guess, where you get to see what you're made of and what type of person you are. If you cower away or do you stay and you keep fighting. And yeah, I was proud about that. But again, guy, if you were to go and you're probably aware, but if you don't know, like go and read some of the awards that some guys who got high awards than I did, and you'll see some really really brave acts. Yeah.
Absolutely. No, but as I say, mate, I wanted to touch on it for you as well because what's coming next, I want people to see that side of who you are as well. And mate, so this is where we talk about your discharge from the military. So you come back, fourth trip, and talk me through your discharge from the military, mate.
So essentially, what happened is when I got back from the permanent PSD in Kabul, they got back and they went, "Okay, you've done 3 rotations. You're a junior soldier, but the natural progression is for you to become a 2IC. So go become a Lance Jack." So a heap of us got sent. We went. I did my sub 2 first, so I did my tactics team leader course first. So I had to go up to Singo and do this where I was away for 8 weeks. I think it's 8 weeks, something like this. And essentially they already had me earmarked. I was going to become a 2-2, I think it was. So I was going to become a Lance Jack for Team 2. And I did that course and they're like, okay, you've got to go to sub 1 now. I'm like, fuck, another 3 months away. Like this, I think it was two or 3 months anyway. So I'm like, okay. So I had a girlfriend through a lot of these phases, rotations on and off, and we were together at this time. And so it was supposed to be a quiet year for me on tag. I was going to be in Australia. I was like, and I knew, like, I was ready. I knew I was going to be doing exercise and that, but I need to be in Australia for a while. Did the permanent PSD, come back, did an exercise in Melbourne, a maritime exercise, ship underways, all that. That was pretty cool. Went on to sub 2. As soon as I finished that, I had a week and then sub 1. I'm like, this is a bit too much. So like I tried to RPL it. So I tried to put my recognized prior learning, and I said, look, this is the reasons I've fucking spent so much time away from home. I need get some time at home. I'm having issues with my partner, and they're like, we need you to do sub 1 because we need the regular soldiers, regular military to be around you guys. I'm like, that's, for me, that's a piss poor excuse. Like, because you can up here if you've done sub 2 first and you've done enough time up, you don't have to do it. But they wanted me to do it to be around other soldiers. So I went to sub 1. Like I wasn't happy about it. I hadn't shaved, and they're like, I don't need to. Like I actually had a chit at the time, but they're like, okay, you need to give us your phones. I'm like, you can't take our phones on one team. Like the Prime Minister makes the call, we go. So I had a little bit of cockiness about it from the start. And I treated that sub 1 as I did it, everything they asked, I passed, but I was drinking. And essentially that was a bit of my demise at the end. The woe in charge, I know she had a bit of a beef with me. And once we finished our last field phase, the 2-week field phase, we had a week or 2 to go. I ended up, as soon as I finished that, I caught up with I went to a music festival and had drugs that weekend. Monday morning, they called me in to drug test me. So targeted, yeah, probably. They had a beef with me because I was a little bit cocky, and that was who I was at that time, and got piss tested and failed. And I still remember this woe telling me, she goes, no one's ever fought this and won, so she goes, your career's over. I'm like, I'm gonna fight this. Like I've got to. I have thought I've done enough time, and once they can hear my reasoning and my case, that I should be able to get past this. But essentially, what happened was, yeah, I failed that drug test. My CSM had to come up and see me, and essentially I had to show cause. So you got 4 weeks. I had to go see my CO. He has a bit of a chat to you, and he's like, tell me what happened and why you should stay. And that's essentially what I did. I had 4 weeks to write up a report on what happened. I did that with the help of a lawyer that they give you, and I submitted it. And this was around, I think it was like the 2nd of January, I actually submitted this. Had to go into work, and I wasn't doing well then. I was drinking a lot. They'd removed me from my company. They had me, and it's not really the units. It's not individuals in the unit. It was just the process. They sent me to the sergeant's mess to clean the car park, and so it was a bit of a kick in the balls. Like I've done everything they'd asked me to do, I'd asked, except in my off time, I partied hard. So, I went in this January to submit my paperwork. They got it. I think it was like a week or so later, 2 weeks later, the CO said, come in and speak to me. And he's like, here's my findings. He's like, I'm going to recommend for you to stay. But he goes, here's what's going to happen. You're going to go and you're going to become a driver for Sokost in Canberra. That's my he says that's my recommendation. But he goes, ultimately what happens is I make the call, then it goes to SOCOMMAND, and then if they approve it, then it goes to who are the people in charge of your careers?
Oh, yeah, I know who you. Yeah, I know who you're talking.
Schema.
Schema. Yep.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, so I'm nervously waiting, and they said that we'll tell you in like around a month. So at this time, I'm in the sergeant's mess, doing shit jobs. No one was really talking to me. I had some mates who were keeping an eye on me, but I was drinking a lot. I wasn't doing well. Um, uh, yeah, so sort of spiraling out of control. I was losing my crew, the people who were around me. Some mates were still touching base with me, but they were doing their own stuff, and I had their own operations and that coming up. And essentially, I heard back from Command, and they said, "Okay, yep, we agree with everything. You're going to become a driver, but it's got to go to schema now." Schema. So I've went through 2 levels, and I'm like, and everyone in the who were in my network were hearing that it was going to get approved. I was going to be like one of the first soldiers to stay, even though there's zero tolerance, because my case was quite compelling, I guess.
Mm.
And I went to schema, and they said no. They said we don't buy it. Yeah, zero tolerance. Essentially said you've got X amount of days, you're leaving. So that moment was tough. Yeah, to know like this, I'll had my adulthood, my manhood had just always been a commando.
Mm. Well,
Um,
you'd lost your purpose, mate. Like who you were.
yeah, like what am I going to do now? So it was lucky enough that I had a good enough, I guess, a rapport with people, and I was a good enough soldier where there was enough contracting and stuff like this still going on. It was actually in a big peak sort of phase. So what helped me get me through it was I knew I was going back to Afghanistan pretty soon because I got a contract with the army. It was called Global at the time. So we had the contract was with US ACE, so Army Corps of Engineers. So I essentially within 6 weeks of discharging, I was back in Afghanistan up near Uzbekistan, I think it was Mazar-i-Sharif, so right up north. I was back at war. So this was what was happening to me. I was doing trips, I was getting back, I was decompressing, I was fucking my brain, and then going back and then going into a pressure cooker. And I did this over and over for years. Essentially, I did this stint with Global, and then I transferred and went on the embassy. So I worked for the Australian Embassy for a year and a half, year and 3/4, something like this, until again alcohol and drugs put a stop to that with an incident, and uh, my life had just been incident, like pressure cooker. You do something stupid, or you're forced out of your job, and this would even repeat for another couple of years. And when I actually was seeking help to stop this and my addiction, and my psychiatrist had seen a lot of special forces guys, and he's like, you don't understand what's happening to your brain. Your brain doesn't fully develop to your sort of sort of early to mid 20s, I think it was. And he's like, ever since you joined Kabuga at 20, but you were at war since you were 22, your brain wasn't fully developed. And all you've known is like high stress environments. And then how do you get rid of that is alcohol and then drugs. So you're just in this constant flight or fight, like just round and round, and it's getting worse and worse. And essentially the wheels just come off. The wheels will come off probably my second or third rotation, but it was completely off then after not losing that job with the contracting with the Australian Embassy. Always what my first rock bottom. Sure.
And
Probably second or third, to be honest.
and mate, well, we're going to talk about the next phase now, but I'm like listening to that, mate. I can understand, like, mate, you've done things that a normal 20-year-old, like as you said, you 20, you're in Kapuka, you're going in and out of, you did 4 trips to Afghanistan, like back to back to back, and then that's not including your contract side of things, mate. That's going to affect anybody. Like, and you were trying to just find your way of coping, and like as you said, that really hurt when you were, to show cause to stay in the unit. And, like I look at that, mate, anyone, like we're human beings, as you know now, you found purpose again, and we're going to get into that a little bit later. But like that was your purpose then, mate. You're a warfighter, you're a commando. That's what you do.
Yeah, yeah, that's all I knew. All I knew. Like I didn't have any other profession. That's what it was, and I knew how to do it, and I was good at it. But I was comfortable at war because you only had to focus on war. But looking back, I think they changed it where you've got to decompress for at least a year. You can't keep going back. Where me back then, it was just we need guys who's willing to do it. Like, okay, let's do it.
I'll do it, and just it doesn't. Yep,
Yeah,
the consequences later. Like it's all good. Like yeah,
yeah,
and
yeah.
and as you said, you hit rock bottom, and so you entered your first rehab in 2016, and you did 15 rehabs over 5 years, mate. And talk me
Yeah.
through this next part of your life.
My first rehab was, I still remember this because it was such a like, you got to swallow your pride here. But essentially, I couldn't function without alcohol. And I, when I got discharged from the military, and I remember drinking heavily, and then I got to the point where I'd wake up in the morning and I couldn't stop shaking, and I had this uncontrollable anxiety that the world was going to end. And I remember drinking and it going away, and I'm like, oh, like, I think this is going to be a problem in the future. Like I distinctly remember this. I was living near Coogee Bay Hotel at the time, and I remember like, oh, I think this is probably I think this is bad alcoholism. And essentially this it got to the point where my ex at the time was sort of trying to take care of me, and she could see what was happening and help me get into my first rehab where I'd only last a week, I think it was. I deliberately got myself discharged. I drank, got myself kicked out, and went straight to South America, where the where everything was cheap. And this I should have stayed and got through that phase, but I wasn't ready. And now I understand the principles of recovery, where you have to be ready to surrender. I was a soldier, and you don't surrender. So it's like, and I will talk about that mentality, what that means later, but it is, I wasn't ready to stop. It wasn't bad enough yet, even though it was terrible. I needed to go deeper into this whole, essentially, yeah, like I'd do a rehab, I would get kicked out or something would happen. I'd find an excuse. There was always an excuse. And then I'd go back out. A hurricane would pretty much last 2 to 3 weeks of me just tearing shit up. And then I would end up back in rehab, and it was either police or ambulance or self-harm, which would put me back in there, or psychiatric ward, which would, ambos would take me there. And this was just going, but it was getting worse and worse and worse. And I got sectioned multiple times. I was caught at the Gap in Sydney. Had helicopters and out there. Like I wasn't well, and I had to go through that. I had to put a lot of friends through a lot of stress. My family through a lot of stress. My mum, she accepted that I was going to die. I've been stitched up so many times from self harm. That even my psychiatrist had sort of prepped my family like he's going to probably end up another statistic. So just be prepared. And fortunately, it didn't come to that. I seen the light, but it was a time of just chaos and lost years. But I needed to go through that. I wouldn't be where I am now if I didn't go through that heartache and that. Okay, there's so many emotions to describe what I went through. It was just a terrible time, and not just for me, for everyone around me.
And mate, I can relate because I was there myself 10 years ago, and I've just recently written my book about my struggles, and I know exactly what you're talking about. And it does get dark, doesn't it? Like there's not like you think that, well, you don't love yourself, so who else can love you? And you just think, yeah, I'll do the world a favor, and just I will end my life. And as I say to anyone who, both of us have been through it, and I'm not making it about me, mate, this is your story, but I can relate, is you've got to hit rock bottom before you see the light and come back up.
It's the only way, and you have to be willing to come back up out of that light. Yeah, like you have to surrender to this. And if you hit rock bottom, and it doesn't have to keep going, but if you're not willing to surrender, it will keep going, and it will take everything from you, everything,
Mm.
leave you with nothing. But the good thing about losing everything is you get to rebuild. Yeah.
And mate, look at you. Like we're gonna continue like where you are now, and mate, who you are, and your transformation to you know John 2.0 is amazing,
Mm.
mate. Like it's and mate, I see what you do online, and mate, you're an absolute inspiration now for what you do with your training, and we're gonna talk about that shortly. But mate, you are, and I just want to say, mate, I'm bloody glad you're here, and it's yeah, as I say, mate, you're an inspiration.
Oh, thanks, mate. Thanks. Going back quickly to what we had to go through, something that I was obviously addicted to alcohol and drugs at the time. And I was also addicted to like anxiety, I think, and risk taking, hence like stress, which was just the life I knew.
Yep.
Um, but when you put alcohol and drugs on top of someone who's not mentally well, it just creates an inferno. So if you see anyone out there and you know people who are going through this, alcohol will not help you. It will make things so much worse. You've got to remove the alcohol before you can do any work. You can't work with anyone who's or taking drugs. You you don't see see things clearly, and everything's clouded. So you need to remove that before you can do any work. And I wasn't prepared to do that at the time, where I had to learn the hard way by going through that. But now I get the opportunity to show my story and speak with experience to help people get out the other side and show that it is possible. Like even though I carry scars and whatnot from it, it is possible. Legal issues and all that, and all can be dealt with. But there is light. You can get back to and rebuild yourself into a way better version, which fortunately I've been able to do.
And so, mate, for you, were you at this stage when things were at rock bottom? Were you what mid-30s at this stage?
Yeah, yeah, it was 30s, 31, 32. So I got sober 2020. It was October, around October it was. And what's that? 3 years ago. So I was 35. So around that period was like 29 to 28 to 33,
Mm.
34.
It's
Yeah.
finding out, as you say, mate, you've been at war. You're trying to, find life outside of the military of, who you were and the new norm. This is the new norm of life for you, and for you, you get stuck in Spain during COVID, and talk me through this part of your journey to where you are now.
Yeah. So I thought it was a great idea to go to Poland and get a anti-abuse injection. So, so anti-abuse, if you don't know anti-abuse, it's dysfluorium. So if you take it and you drink, it makes you violently ill. You can actually die from it as well. So I was like, yeah, I found Poland, Ukraine, I think Russia. You could get these injections, and it was essentially if you drank, it was a deterrent. And I remember speaking to my doctor about it. He's like, don't get that. Like you'll die. Like it won't stop you from drinking. So I went to Poland, like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to show people, and the wheels that come off worse. And I was with a mate at the time. I sent him back to Oz. I'm like, I'm tearing stuff up. Wasn't thinking straight. I was very, very unwell. And I ended up in Spain. So I've met a girl in a Spanish, well, my wife actually, a little bit before then. So we were trying to build a relationship, but I could never stay sober. So she ended up leaving me. But I'd been to her family's in Valencia, which is here in Spain. So I came to Spain. I don't know. I couldn't really explain why, but I was thinking straight. And literally, when I come through, was COVID happened. It was March. And literally, I come through Italy, and they doing temperatures on your head and like these space suits, and I'm like, what the hell? And I was drunk and high, and like I don't get it. I don't know. And I get to Valencia and I get into a place and a hotel, I think it was, and then I'm kicked out straight away. And they're like, there's like an incident, there's like an emergency. I'm like, I don't understand. They're like, you need to go to a shelter. I'm like, what? I was just out of it from substance use, and this was fortunately the start of a rock bottom, which got me out. And I was being stuck in Spain, couldn't get out. I had like 3 flights to UK. One I actually fell asleep at the airport on, but essentially couldn't get out. And I remember speaking with the embassies, and they're like, "You need to get to London to get a flight back to Oz." I'm like, "I can't get there." They're like, "Okay, you got to bunker down." And so I end up in Barcelona. I got an apartment and got really sick, mentally sick. Made some connections, got really heavily into drugs and shooting up cocaine and stuff like this. And I entered 2 rehabs in Barcelona and essentially and had an epiphany, I guess, which I see you sort of need this in recovery. And it's where you see, okay, like I understand now. And it was, I had to surrender and I wanted to build a family. And I remember going to the last rehab because I'd been locked in hospital the night before from being psychotic, being handcuffed to the bed and shit myself. And like, it's like not a good scene, but I remember thinking like, I'm really sick. I need to stop. I need to surrender. I'm going to be stuck in this fog, which I'd heard about people doing, which I've been stuck in that before for weeks at a time in psychiatric wards. But this time I had no one. There was no Australian hospital. Like I was in Spain, had no friends, no family there. I was all on my own. And I remember going to this rehab thinking like this has to be the time you surrender. This has to be it, or you're not going to come back. Yeah. And that's what I was able to do. My girlfriend we weren't together at the time. She got back to Spain at this time, come and got me out of she actually put me in a hospital a little bit before this and seeing what was happening and helped me get at the other side of this and started my recovery process after. But the one thing I can say is out of 15 rehabs, the only thing I did differently on this last one was I entered an aftercare plan. So what that means is if you end up and people will know people who've gone to a rehab and they do their 4 weeks or 3 months or 6 months, if you do not do anything when you leave that rehab, you will lose it all. So you need to have some accountability where you're going and speaking to a therapist or a counselor or part of a group. The group's probably the best form where you still admit like I've got a problem. Because that was my issue that I think I'm normal again. I feel well. I'm not psychotic anymore. I'm not aggressive. I'm not all these emotions. So I think I can go back drinking. It will be different. Nothing's changed. Yeah. So the only way to do it is you've got to surround yourself with some other addicts or alcoholics or people going through similar instances where there's a supervisor or a counselor who can direct you through, because that's the most difficult part is when you're out of a rehab on the street where there's no one to save you. You can just go and pick up.
So, mate, talk me through addiction, like, and talk me through like your like. Is it are you chasing the high, or what is it in the addiction of when you were using drugs and alcohol? What were you trying to escape pain, or talk me through that? Talk me through that process.
Yeah, so there's a physiological side, which is the need for it. So the delirium tremens, the if you stop drinking, you get shakes, the anxiety, the sweats, heart palpitations. This all will happen when you stop drinking. So there's that side of it, but everyone starts drinking for a reason. It's a tool. Um, my tool, I guess, it was for numerous reasons. I was definitely more sociable on it. I definitely do things differently, and a lot of guys would live vicariously through me. And I've actually had this discussion with a mate now who I went through with, who's a psychologist. He's studying this. I think he's doing his 4th year in psychology now, and he's like, "Did we play a part in this? Because we encouraged you to do these, get up to these behaviors, and didn't stop you." I'm like, "Yeah, but it's not on you. It's on me. Like, I take full ownership." So I was doing it to fit in. I was doing it to have social ease, I guess. but I was also doing it to disconnect, and I was also doing it to not think and escape. And then by the end of it, I was doing it to feel. So it went this whole like range of emotions while I was doing it. And but at that stage, you're just dependent. It's life, it's oxygen. Without it, I can't survive. And it's the reason I had to get up in the morning, and I could not get out of bed without drinking like half a bottle of vodka or whatever I had. Like I could not get out of bed. I was so sick, and that's how it's progressive. Addiction's progressive, so it doesn't get better even as you get older. Even if you get it under control and you pick up, 2 years sober, it goes back to being worse very, very soon. Like it doesn't go away. It's like a muscle memory. Like you never get a hold of it. It's progressive. You need to understand that.
Mm, absolutely, mate. It's just wild, like and mate, I'm seeing myself in a sense through what you're talking to as well, because at my worst, like I was trying to escape pain, and so I would turn to alcohol and drugs to numb the pain that I was in and I was feeling, and it wasn't necessarily the high that I was chasing. It was the sense of that, well, I just feel good for that short time, and like the pain's not there. So, this is good. This is the way of life. Like it's a new me, and it's, but then the after effects for me were worse. And that was when I went further and further into into the black dog. And, and yeah, because it was like, because I know some people, like I know some addicts talk about the rush of, the high, and that's what it was. But for you, it was that different.
It's a combination. Like I was chasing the dragon, trying to get a new feeling. I was also trying to like every bad thing that happened to me in life was apart from my childhood was alcohol and drug brought on. Like I did this under the influence, and all my lost jobs, every job I've lost is from alcohol and drugs. And I've had some, good positions, obviously, and uh, it um, it's like losing those jobs would give me a reason to fucking drink.
Yeah.
A good day give me a reason to drink. A bad day is a good reason to drink. I was just addicted. I was an addict, and I was born an addict. I understand this now. I've been like this ever since I was a child. I did it with sport. My first addiction was comfort eating. And I got big as a kid, and then got picked on a lot, and then I found sport, and then that gave me recognition, and sport allowed me to fitness allowed me to build up resilience, so I could handle the shit that was going on at home. So all those, I was uh, essentially from a small age, a young age, molded to be an addict. Yeah, to use something external to make myself feel normal or to suppress emotions and feelings. And like that stoic sort of stuff I spoke about at the start through military training. Like I'm very good at that, but that's because I've learned how to do it as a child,
Mm.
suppress emotions. It may be good for my job, but that it comes the wheels will come off eventually. Yeah. But
Ab-
for me, multiple reasons.
Absolutely. And mate, you mentioned your now wife was pivotal in that, helping you finally get to where you are now. And I want to talk about the birth of your daughter. How was the birth of your daughter in your recovery process as well?
Yeah, my wife, I owe pretty much my recovery to her, I guess. Like it probably it's 99% chance it wouldn't happen. I probably wouldn't be here without her. So I'll always be very thankful and fortunate to have her in my life. And I found her actually it was in Byron Bay, and I'd relapsed in a rehab, and I met her out when I was drinking. I was supposed to be in a rehab, and she was trying to save me from day one. So she never gave up on me, even though she had to a few times. So she gave me a shot this last time in Spain, but said you have to do an aftercare plan. I did that. And then she fell pregnant 3 or 4 months into my sobriety. So pretty much I share my 1 year clean time with Adara, my oldest, who's turning 3 in November this year. I share my sobriety date pretty much with her. I incorporate those together. So that was when I talked about my last rehab going going in thinking like this has to change, like that epiphany. One of the key factors was wanting a family, and I'd always wanted to provide for a family or bring them up in a different environment that I had, and I get the opportunity to do that, and I'm very blessed to be able to do this as a father who doesn't drink and who's present. I've still got a lot of work to do. Like I still have my issues, but I've found outlets, and I'm a work in progress. But they get to have a father that's sober and doesn't bring all their baggage along. So you probably heard this analogy where it's like generational sort of trauma, or it gets passed down,
Yep.
and then someone has to break that link. Someone has to do it, and I get the opportunity to do that. So I'm very, very grateful to have that opportunity.
I know what you're talking about, mate, because yeah, mine's the same. Like I get it. I know it's generational, passed down to generation. And, a big part of that was writing my book was, it was like, no, I'm gonna break this. It's time. It's time that this is broken. And for you with your work, like, do you still work with your psych as well? Like, are you still working a lot with your psych now, or have you sort of found other outlets for you that you can turn to?
Yeah, so when I came over to Mallorca, where we decided to set up base, I started working with a therapist, addiction specialist, and he's pretty pivotal in where I am today. And we're really good mates, and we still do some work in that together, which now I'm moving into a different sort of role in my life, finding new purpose. And uh, if you want to go back and what was
Yeah,
I
so
lost my frame of mind there for a
no,
sec.
no, that's all right, mate. No, it's just saying that you found other outlets other than,
Oh, yeah.
talking to your psych, like
Gotcha.
the things that you do now. You don't
Yeah.
rely heavily on as much on your psych as what you did.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, the military psych, I spoke to him about 3 months ago. I had to get some paperwork signed, and he's like, "John, the prodigal son." I was like, he goes, "We still talk about you. This is at Toronto Hospital." He goes, "We still talk about you." I'm like, that's amazing. Yeah, I heard it's all good, and he said, "No, it is all good." But yeah, I had my addiction therapist here, pretty pivotal. We're still got a relationship. I've been a part of a group, addiction group since I came here. So I did 12 months with him intensive, getting to essentially just an aftercare plan, getting to why I do the things I do, giving me time to settle. And the first 6 months was probably one of the toughest things I have to do. Yeah, that having to deal without my tool, my survival, my oxygen, which is the bottle and drugs, having to let all those, like my cortisol was so high, that it was like I'd been in a car accident when I was sleeping. And I had to get tested because a bird would fly over and I couldn't stop shaking. And
Yeah.
it took so long to come down. I'm like, I've proper fucked myself where like I just have to, like, my brain's been rewired, and it does come good. It just takes a long time.
Mm.
So all those things can repair, but I'm still part of that group. I got through all that heartache, and essentially I found fitness again. I found who I was when I was a child, all those coping mechanisms. Fitness was a pretty pivotal tool in my recovery. So I found my discipline, my drive, build my resilience up, and I just got back to um, just routine and structure, and that's what they teach you in the military. I went back to being stoic again, so I cracked on with that sort of way of living, and it's all those combination of things and support of my wife had did help, yeah. But part of that group, that recovery group, was pretty important, and I do need to get back involved with that, but I'm just so busy with my newborn.
Yeah, well, mate, and as I said, we're doing this, and we jumped on. Yeah, you just had your second child, mate, 6 weeks ago. So
Yeah,
congratulations on that.
thanks.
And mate, you juggling now the juggling act of having two children, which is, as you said at the start of the podcast, mate, before we jumped on, was, it's now that juggling act. And But for you, mate, you found, as you said, you found fitness and you now do Hyrox. And I want to talk about this because a lot of people wouldn't know what Hyrox is. And mate, you're actually pretty bloody good at it. So talk me through finding Hyrox.
Yeah, so I found Hyrox here in Spain. So it was I seen it advertised at the gym. So when I got into recovery, I sometimes they remove fitness from you because fitness can be an escape, and they want you to go for the emotion. But my therapist is like, no, fitness and sport has been so key in all your life. You need to keep doing it. So I kept training, and I wanted to get into some MMA. And he's like, no, you can't do MMA because of the aggressiveness of it. So he goes, you can wrestle. I went, okay, I'll do jiu-jitsu. So I did that for 12 months. And I wanted to compete. That was my burning desire. But there was COVID on, and this is how ridiculous it was. You're wearing masks doing jiu-jitsu. Like it's crazy, but you couldn't do it. You couldn't do a tournament because of the laws. So I found Hyrox at the gym, and I read it, and I was like, this is like military. This is running and carrying shit and throwing shit. I think I could be good at this, but I couldn't run. I'd had knee surgery. The doctor said I needed an osteotomy because I had no cartilage in the outside of my right knee. But I couldn't run until I had this next surgery. And I was like, yeah, well, I was lifting weights and I went, I'm going to see if I can get back to running. I was never a great runner. I was good, good enough. But it was always in the top sort of 30% of 25% of the guys in the military, but never those first few guys at the front. And I taught myself how to progressively overload with running and then got into running. And then I told my wife, I'm going to sign up for this event and I'm going to do it. This is like, there's something calling me to it. So it's pretty tough. It's essentially 8 1 kilometer runs with stations broken up in between. The competition has come to Australia now. You'll see it grow a lot. It's gonna become huge. It will probably outgrow CrossFit. They're predicting because of the accessibility to get into it. But essentially, what you have to be is you have to be a good runner and you have to be strong and you have to have a high level of fitness and lactate threshold tolerance, all this type of stuff because it's pretty brutal. And then I did my first race, went to Austria. Been living in Europe, everything's so close, and went to Austria and did really well. And then looked sort of what other guys in the world were doing, and my times weren't too bad. So I said to my wife, like, I'm going to give this a crack. I think I can make it to the top. And she goes, you can't train more than twice a day because that's your addict coming out in you. And I'm like, I have to. I've got to train twice a day. Like this is how what all the top guys are doing it. So I did it for 4 or 5 months in the off season. I came back and within on my fourth race back doing this, I was in what they categorize as the elite. So I was in the top 15 guys in the world, and I've been there the last 2 years. And yeah, competed at 2 world championships at that elite level. Done pretty well. Haven't podium, but I've been in the mix. But essentially, it's you need to be a high level runner, but it can handle stress, a lot of stress, and that's all my childhood, my military career, all this has been building me to handle this because it's 60 minutes of like I did tough things in the military that went for days, hours. This goes for 60 minutes, but the acute discomfort from this is insane. It's pretty brutal.
So, mate, do you think it's as brutal as selection or it's worse?
Different. It's different. It's acute. So even acute is supposed to be quite short term. This is 60 minutes. So the human body is the best athletes in the world can live at threshold, which is like your 87 to 93% of your max heart rate for 60 minutes. We do that, but we don't just run. You pull a ski erg for a kilometer, you push a 200 kilo sled 50 meters, you pull a 150 kilo sled 50 meters, you do 80 meters of burpee with a jump. You've got all these activities, 100 meters of lunges with 30 kilo on your back and 100 wall balls at the end. So you've got 8 stations with this run in between. And like I average like a 3:45 in between a station, and I'm one of the slower guys, but it's fast. Like it's a really decent 10K time I can do in between doing this. So In a way, everything's sort of prepped me for this. Yeah.
Mate, I see the workouts that you do online and that, mate. As I say, mate, I'm just in awe of where you've got to and the turnaround of, from where you were to where you are now, mate, it's unbelievable. And like it's part of who you are now. And so are you like traveling around the world now competing? Is that what you're doing?
Essentially, I get to now, yeah. So the way that's sort of set up is they get the top 15 guys in the world, and we get to race at different countries, and there's prize money now, and it's growing every year. It's big sponsorships starting to come involved. So unfortunately I'm 38, so it's the sport. It was established in 2018, I think. So every year it's getting way more popular, more eyes are coming to it. Um, so essentially, there'll be 4 or 5 races a year in different countries where we go, and it's televised and commentators, and they get to tell a bit of us, our story, and we get to race online and in front of the crowds. And it's that wanting to be an athlete when I was younger and didn't quite making it, and then went special forces. I get to live that dream of when I was younger. So I'm holding on to this as much as I can because I am getting older. But what I'm sort of seeing in this sport is it's very, very tough where there's not a lot of young guys doing it. And I think endurance, you can keep increasing it as you get older. You
Mm.
lose speed, but that ability to suffer, you've got to be pretty resilient to do this. And that's what I'm sort of seeing. It might change in the future, but we're a lot of older guys, and I compete against a guy at the top who's like 43. But he's a triathlete and he's got that background. But what it's shown me is you've got the desire to keep working hard, but you've got to work hard because we've got to essentially train like a half marathoner, but we have to be able to deadlift, 2 times your body weight, squat 1.5 times your body weight, because we've got to move stuff and not fall apart carrying, 100 meters lunges with 30 kilo. Like people can't walk after that. And we've got to be able to run, like a 330 to 340 kilometer after it.
Mate, that's brutal. But as you say, it's the willingness to endure, which is what you go back to your military training. When you
I
did when you did selection, mate, that was what it was. It was the willingness to endure.
and knowing it's going to come to an end, and that willingness to suffer. I did a race. I had to go to Anaheim in Los Angeles last May to qualify for the Worlds, and when I'd never done well traveling to America, the time zone affected me, and I remember I got really fit to do this race. I went over, and all my vitals had sort of crashed. My HIV was affected. I'm like, I've just got to rewrite the books with I don't do well overseas. And I remember doing this race, and I was 3 stations in, and I was winning or coming second, and like I'm hurting a lot. And uh, you have this voice in your head or this scenario where it's like, just pull out, like this is so uncomfortable. And I actually I'd never practiced this in like mentally rehearsing, but I drew on my mate Rowan, who was killed in on my third rotation. I was like, I started thinking about him when I was enduring this pain, and I never really spoke. I spoke to a few mates about it, but I never really brought up to mainly till here. And that uh, that suffering, I don't really know why that did that. I think it was giving me fuel to like just keep withstand this because of how brutal it is with the heart rate so high, knowing there's still 35, 40 minutes to go. But my mind going into places like that has just been prepped through all the events I've been through in life, preps me to do stuff like this. But the good thing is it only lasts 60 minutes or less.
Mate,
Yeah.
I know what you're saying because I did my first triathlon last year after losing
Oh,
66
really?
kilos. And
Wow.
mate, I know I got to the last 400 meters because everything went wrong in the race. Like I was like, yep, let's go. Got in the water and a cramp started. And then I was cramping. And I thought, oh, it'll ease up on the bike. And I know what you're saying. Like you're going through your head and you're like, you got to you got to strategize. Like I'd never done a triathlon and I'm sitting there going, okay, all right, how do I, okay, all right, my whole game plan has changed. And I made a mental like I made a conscious decision that I'd see people just throw their head back and stop, and I was like, no, keep going. They would inspire me to keep going, and then, mate, as you said with Rowan, I got to the last 400 meters and there was nothing left in the tank. I had nothing. And I looked up to my late Nana, who she saved my life the day that I went to end my life. And I turned to Nan and I said, Nan, I need something from you now. You've always been with me. You were there on that day. I need something. And mate, she put all the bullies' faces in my mind of right then. And this guy said, come on, mate, you got 400 to go. And I let out an almighty fuck you to all the bullies, and that just kicked me on home, mate. And it was like what you
Yeah.
said, mate. We will go, like our bodies will long give up before our minds do, and like it's sorry, our mind gives up long before our bodies do, and it's that willingness to just keep going because you know it's going to end at some point.
Yeah, yeah, you just got to have that hope, and there's so many different tools you can use to how you finish something that's difficult. But I've gone through so many of them where it's like you're never going to race again. Like this is the last race you've ever got to do, or it's like you've only got to worry about the next station, or just like I try to do Bruce Lee, where it's
Yep.
like just empty your mind, be like water. Like I listen to that when I do really hard running sessions, stuff, just sort of trying to program myself, but you're right, yeah. Like the mind is, um, it is the most powerful thing we have, but it can also be the weakest thing we have, and it's all about training it. Yeah, like our bodies, we're capable of so much more than we realize. We don't
Absolutely.
hit even near our true potential. Yeah, yeah. But you do have to be trained, but and you've got to have the hardware, so the ligaments strong and muscles strong and that. But we can do so much more. We've got enough fuel in us, depending on your size, to do like 5 marathons back to back if your ligaments and joints and all that hold together. We
Yeah,
we
right.
can keep we've got enough stored energy. We're the kings of the jungle when it comes to endurance, anything like this, because the way we sweat and our body, we can keep our bodies cool, but your mind will give up for generally your body if you're depends if you're trained or not. But yeah.
Absolutely. And mate, so like obviously going forward, yeah. So will we see you back in Australia competing out here in Australia or?
So me and my wife now, we sort of like the life we've got here in Mallorca. It does remind me a bit of home back in Oz. It's relaxed. It's not as expensive, and
Yeah.
which I see that in the news. It's crazy the housing prices and everything. Cost of living is good here, but we like our life here. I will have to come back to Oz just for to my daughters to meet my family. Mum has been over here. She will come back over as well. Uh, but I don't know if Australia will be home. But I don't even know when we're coming back. I, I think I might be going to Hong Kong in a few months to compete. But still, then it's what 7 8 hours flight or
Mm.
something like this. It's still too far. So hopefully in the next maybe 2 3 years for a visit.
So, mate, away from Hyrox and being a dad, what are you doing away from that? Like, I know your training takes up a lot of your time and being a dad, but what are you doing away from that in especially in the recovery space?
Yep. So I'm coaching people online. So initially I set up a business to use fitness as a tool in recovery because I knew it helped me and I've seen there's a bit of a gap there. And I started helping some people and it wasn't really working. And I'm like, okay, I need to look at this differently. And I spoke to a few people and they said, why don't you become a therapist yourself or like a psychologist essentially. And I'm like, I'd have to go back to school. I'd have to do my bridging course, and then because I never finished year 12, but that's easy enough. And then psychology, it's at uni, and and then I got put onto an army psych who was a mate of my mates, and she found a course for me and said, why don't you become a counselor? She goes, you don't need like a high level education. You need life experience and you need a qual. I'm like, okay. So she showed it to me, and I was like, huh, this this sounds like this is for me. Yeah. So I'm still working on and off with some people who are in recovery. So I mentor them, working with my therapist to put me through my program here. So I've done some time now. I can sort of pass on knowledge. What I've done now is sort of stepped a little bit away from that, and I'm studying, which has been put on hold since my daughter got born, to become a counselor and specialize in addiction, because I see that as my future. I've got enough experience now, and I can show people that it is possible, but I need a bit of I need a qual to essentially for insurance, but to know how to do this correctly, because I can share my story and show how to do it, but I need a proficient way and a legal way to do this. So that's my goal over the next 2 years, is to get that done, and then start helping people in a more higher level. Yeah, but I just need that qual to be able to do this. But unfortunately, time wise, I've got to juggle this around and competing. Training and competing so much, it takes up a big chunk. But where there's a will, there's a way. I need to. Things will quieten down a bit with my daughter once another 3 months or so, when she's not so little,
Mm,
so I can get back to that, because that's my future. That'll be my purpose. Is like I'm building a pretty good personal brand with what I'm doing competing wise, and people know who I am and where I come from, what I do. But I need this to really help people.
absolutely. No, mate. And mate, have you thought about a book, mate? You thought about writing a book?
Yeah, that will be on the cards, yeah, for sure. Um, I probably need a ghostwriter, me sitting down and writing it myself. It's funny, like the mate of mine who I said is doing his fourth year, I think, as psychology. He's been wanting to write a book for ages called the Jon Wynn Chronicles, and that was all my adventures on the piss, and all those all those stories of me. And if you're a mate of mine, you will know a lot of this stuff. Yeah, how wild I was, and we all were. But yeah, I would like to do a book, because there's a lot of stuff in there that I haven't spoken. I'm pretty open, but there'd be a few more details in there that I think could really help people and explain in more detail why things happened the way they did, and sort of more of my childhood, how that shaped me.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. And I know because I've just brought one out, and it's cathartic, mate. And you can really see where your life, where it did, where you look back now and go, "Ooh, if I had that time again, might have made a different decision." But it's all experience to get you to where you are. And mate,
Sure.
I want to ask you. There's a couple of questions that before we wrap up that I want to ask you. And mate, obviously you've mentioned you want to be there for the family, and your plans are going forward, just being that really, providing your kids that child like that the childhood and support that you didn't get, and going forward being stable relationship. So that's the family. But mate, knowing what you know now and all that you have been through, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self, and would he listen?
Uh, you've got to be surrounded by good people, which is the one thing, but you need to listen to them. That was me. I didn't listen. I and they told me to stop. Like, this is getting too much. I just kept going on my way. So surround yourself with good people, but listen to them. Yeah.
It's great advice, mate. And like, what advice would you give to any young person who's thinking about joining special forces, mate, and like the preparation, both mentally, physically, and all that you've been through? What advice would you give to them?
So the physical side, train like a hybrid athlete. Essentially, I got so many people contact me. They're like, "Would Hyrox help for selection?" I'm like, "Fucking oath! Like, this is like, yeah, I can do what I'm doing because of how I prepared for it. So I can run, I can do a marathon, an ultra, but I can also lift heavy, and I can go for a very long time under stressful conditions. So train like a hybrid athlete, and you'll be fine. Um, Mentally, you just need to that you can start training this resilience and this willingness to endure just by doing things you don't want to do. Like I'd never really done pack marching, but I did so much of that before I even went to Kapuka. I got my shoulders strong before, because I just knew that was going to be part of it. So I was already putting myself in scenarios at nighttime doing stuff, so it wasn't a shock to me. But you just need to be willing to endure and know that like everything's there. If you want to do this, everything there is not designed to make you um, fail. It's there designed to make you want to quit. So I think there's a difference there. Like if you don't quit, you won't fail.
Mm.
Yeah, that makes
Abs-
sense. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, mate. Absolutely. And mate, looking back now, you served with some amazing guys in the second Commando Regiment and lost 12 commandos killed in action and one killed preparing for deployment. How do you guys remember all the guys from the unit, and how do you want Australians to remember these guys?
Yeah, like I often but my wife's just got home. So there might be a little bit of a noise in the
That's all
background
right, mate.
there.
All good.
Yeah. Yeah, like I often remember recall on the soldiers we lost, mates we lost, like as I brought up about Rowan, like that's all still is in my psyche, yeah, all that stuff. And now that Scott Riker has brought out a book, yeah, like I was around for those times, so seeing this all on social media, all comes back to me. I'm like, and it was literally a mate of mine I was in the four-man team with on Alpha. He literally hadn't spoke to him in a while, and he sent me a photo, and I was like, huh. And I was doing 23 in the photo. I'm like, that was Alpha Company. I'm like, huh. Like it's always memories always coming in, whether I like them or not. Yeah,
Mm.
but I'm very fortunate to have gone through this, and um, yeah, like these guys, we all were willing to make the ultimate sacrifice, essentially. Yeah, and I hope that, and I'm confident it will, that going into the future, the younger generations will hopefully not forget this. And who knows with what's happening with Taiwan and like all this stuff in Europe, and who knows where the world's heading. And the new sort of generations with not willingness to sign up to do service and that. I don't know what the future holds, but hopefully, this period of time, the longest war that we participated in history, is remembered, and I'm confident it will. And I'm very glad to be and fortunate to be a part of that. And yeah, like there's a lot of memories, and I'll obviously take them to my grave with me as well. And there's some of those mates I built, like I lost like I disconnected from a lot of mates, but the real mates are still there, and I still speak with them. We still hang out, which is amazing. Yeah.
Absolutely, mate. And mate, you are, as I said, mate. It's great that you guys are now coming on these podcasts to share your stories, mate, because they are history, mate. Like we were so like I was only talking to a couple of veterans the other day about this, that we're recording this history, mate, now of you guys in your late 30s or early 40s, or some into, some of the older woes in their 50s, that they're not in their 80s like they were in the First World War or the Second World War or, Korea. And you guys, it's still fresh. It's only a decade ago that we stopped fighting in Afghanistan.
Yeah, yeah, it's a different world we live in now. Now we can sort of record this and spread it out. Where back then it was a lot harder. Then, like you'd write about it or you'd hear about it on the wireless, on the radio, and now we're in a position where we get to record this properly, I guess, and we get to put our spin on it and how it, from our eyes and our experiences. But it's changed a lot. But yeah, very, like I say, it's very fortunate to be part of this.
Absolutely, mate. And mate, looking back now and with everything that you've been through and where you've got to, do you think joining the army was still the best decision you've made apart from becoming a dad
Yeah, yeah,
and getting married? Sorry, I'll throw in your wife
yeah,
as well.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, like joining the military. I spoke a little bit Pearl previously about what I can look at myself and say what type of person I am, and I've done some shitty things in my life. I've gone against my values a lot, and it's always generally alcohol, drug induced. But what type of person I am, and when there was stuff was going on in the world, and people had the option to, there was no conscription, so you had the option. You could go and fight in this, or you didn't have to. I put my hand up to do it, so I'm pretty proud of myself for that. that I sort of took on that challenge. Yeah. Now I've gone a bit blank.
Yeah.
But I've done this a few times now. I go on start spieling and then get a little
Nah,
bit lost.
mate,
Uh,
it's all good, mate. No, and you know, like as I say, mate, like it's you like I often ask the guys on reflection now, and was joining the army, the best decision, and they said, well, it's made us and shaped us who we are. Like,
yeah,
we
100%.
who would we be if we didn't join the army and have the experiences that we went through?
Yeah, I had to go through that, and I'm fortunate I did put my hand up, did that. Um, um, I definitely would not change it because I wouldn't be here with the daughters I have now. I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have gone through that shit. I don't know where I'd be and what I'd
Yeah,
be doing, but I do believe that everything does happen for a reason there. And if you go through some situations or events and you come out the other side able to tell the story like yourself, we have a bit of responsibility uh, to pass that on to help other people. And one of the biggest purposeful, I think, in journeys you can go on is to be of service, right? And that keeps you
absolutely.
pointing in the right direction. It's like, this is part of me being service now. I've got something to offer. I'm going to keep doing that. And if I didn't go through this shit and this turmoil, I wouldn't have the stories and the resilience and the capacity to show people what is possible. Like I wouldn't be who I am now, there for sure. So you have to go through it. No, I heard it the other day where it's like if you want for resilient people, they have to go through they have to go through stress. They have to, yeah.
Yeah,
Otherwise, it's the only way it works. Pressure builds diamonds, and it's the only way it works.
absolutely, mate, and I absolutely believe that as well. That we're all here. We've all got a job to do, and and I know it myself. Like you, I wasn't, I wasn't successful on that day, and there was a reason for that. And now I'm here, value adding with podcasts, with telling my story in the hope of helping others. And as you said, mate, the bringing that darkness to the light and bring it to where it belongs. And and we're all here to service of others, and that's sometimes I think is forgotten, but the service of others, mate, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, that's right. Like we're all a collective consciousness, right? Like we're all in this together. Like now, when I went to war, it was us versus them and this division and all that. Now I see things differently. I'm a little bit older, I'm a little bit more wiser, and I live in different cultures now. And like we're all here trying to get on. Like there are some evil people who do some sick stuff, and this does happen. But most people are decent people, and we're all here trying to do our best with what we have.
Hmm.
And just be grateful for what you do have because it can be taken away at a moment's notice. And yeah.
Well, mate, you know it all too well, mate. You've seen it. You've lived it and you've seen it, that it can all be over in an instant. And life is short, and you need to make the most of it while we're here. And mate, I want to finish with a quote, but before I do that, how do people get in contact with you?
Yeah, look, I'm mostly active on Instagram, I guess. Like I was doing Facebook and things like this, but I'm not that IT and savvy, and having like organized things like that, it's not really me. So I just sort of put my eggs in one basket with Instagram, where people can generally contact me on that. Just DM me, and generally that's the best way. I did have a web page, it's not really active right now. Like I just sort of drifted away from that side of things, but just basically on Instagram on Jon Wynn Fitness and Sobriety is the best way. Yeah.
Yeah, and as I say, guys, once you listen to this, if you don't already know John, go out and follow him and watch what he does. He's an absolute, yeah, absolute legend in what he does in his training. And as I say, mate, I've said it throughout the podcast, inspiration, because, mate, you are inspiring people to get back out there and see that there is light at the end of the tunnel. And, mate, I want to thank you for coming on the podcast. And there's a quote that I believe sums up your story, and I'll share it now. So, John, you have served your country with honour, and your story is one of true grit, determination, and having the courage to be brave and test yourself and succeed at the elite level. The quote is, hardships often prepare ordinary people for extraordinary destiny. Fate whispers to the warrior, you can't withstand the storm. The warrior whispers back, I am the storm. John, you are a true warrior and are now using your lived experiences to help others who are struggling. I believe this quote sums you up, and I want to thank you for your service to our country and all that you do for veterans and first responders. And I appreciate you giving up your busy schedule, mate, to come on and share your story. So, Jon Wynn, thank you so much.
Thanks very much, mate. As I said at the start, like it's a pleasure to come on and do these. I know the very first time I did one, I was nervous and I was like, had a fear of judgment and all these stuff. And, my ego was telling me not to do it. And I did it. And the feedback I got was like, holy shit, like this is actually helping people. And so I can leave that aside now. And I thank you for the opportunity to do this because it helps. It's not only helps others, it has helped me as well. And it just helps everyone, I guess, and that's why I like doing it. So I'll continue to do this, but thanks again for having me on, and thanks for that quote.
You're welcome, mate.
We'd like to thank Tactical Recovery for sponsoring this show. Head on over to tacticalrecovery.com.au and use the code TRUEBLUE for one hell of a discount. Tactical Recovery, magnesium-based muscle care. Salty products for sore fuckers. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of True Blue Conversations with your host, Adam Bloom. See you on the front line.